Well, I think consciousness is what we are, you see. If people say, what are we? I would say we are awareness, a state of being aware. Because we are sitting here now, and we apparently, have bodies, and we have colors, and we have labels that people give themselves, and society gives you. I am this religion, I am this race, I am this income bracket, I am But they're just experiences. They're not who we are. They're experiences. I mean, look, we come into this world, and in a ridiculously short time, we leave this world. And yet we self-identify the I with what happens in that transitory, tiny little period between one and the other. I saw an advert. It obviously wasn't a great advert to sell things, because I can't remember what it was for, but it was a brilliant, brilliant concept. And it had a baby coming out at birth and flying through the air like a missile. And as it was traveling through the air at massive speed, it was getting older and older and older. Then eventually it crashes into a grave at the other end as an old person. And that's very symbolic of life. I'm coming up 67 now, and I tell you, it goes like that. But we self-identify with what happens in between. Well, what happens before and after? We are consciousness, awareness. We are that which is having the experience. I'm aware of you, and I'm aware of the room, and I'm aware of what's happening here. What is aware of it? Is it this vehicle for my consciousness that's aware of it, or is it the consciousness for which this is a vehicle that's aware of it? And when people, you read, I've read endless accounts now over the years of near-death experiences, where people talk about their point of observation, leaving the body, looking down on the body, even going out into realms of other realities while the body has ceased to function. And then the body is revived and they return. Well, what is leaving, what is moving its point of attention is that awareness. And that's who we are. That's the I. Now, here's a fantastic irony. I mean, we're drowning in ironies. Is that my philosophy on life is that we are points of attention within an infinite stream of consciousness. Goes across multiple dimensions, multiple realities into infinity. We're a point of attention. So your point of attention can be so tiny that you completely self-identify with the labels. And you might say, who are you? Or I'm Bill and I drive a bus. No. You are consciousness having that experience. You are not Bill, and you're not driving the bus is not who you are. It's what you're doing. You are consciousness. You're the consciousness that is an eternal expression of infinite states of awareness. So you can so focus attention that you believe you're Bill driving a bus, and that's who you are and nothing more. Or you can be a point of attention that expands its awareness and its sense of self and reality, and says, I am infinite awareness having the experience, whatever label you give it. And that is a completely different way of looking at life. Because when you think I am the labels, you are in the world and you are of it. Everything that you experience, all the information that you glean for your perception, comes from the belief that you are your labels. And of course, that is obviously going to give you a self-identity of limitation. What can I do? I'm only are. But when you self-identify with being consciousness, awareness, no form, They're just vehicles for experiencing certain bands of frequency, like this one, which is tiny, by the way. But when you self-identify with being the consciousness having the experiences themselves do not have the same impact upon you. Because when you experience a situation and you believe that is you in your totality, then the experience and you basically become the same thing, and thus it has this massive impact upon you. So, for instance, if you're ridiculed or people hurl abuse at you, if you're self-identifying with the labels that they are abusing and ridiculing, then that becomes a very powerful thing. But when you self-identify with being consciousness having an experience, the same abuse and the same ridicule does no effect at all, ultimately, if you expand your self-identity enough, because you know it's just a here today, gone tomorrow experience. And the people that are the source of it are just ignorant and obviously have their own problems, or they wouldn't do that. So you just kind of smile and move on. It's a completely different way of interacting with reality. But of course, when you start to expand your awareness and you expand it, you start to expand it beyond this programmed reality, which is basically founded on control of information. If you look at the mainstream media, what I call the mainstream everything, mainstream science, mainstream medicine, mainstream politics, mainstream all of it, it's basically an information construct. I call it in my talks and books the postage stamp consensus. It's a tiny band of information and perception of reality. And if you stay within that tiny band, which is taught in the schools and the universities and the colleges, and it's pounded out 24/7 in the media, then you are considered normal. And what they're really saying is not that you're normal, but you are conforming to what we want you to believe is normal and how things are. So when your focus of attention is so focused on that, only on that postage stamp consensus perception of everything coming from the mainstream, then the only information you're getting to form your perceptions, thus your behavior, is coming from the mainstream. It's coming from newspapers and mainstream sources, television news, whatever. And it's coming from people around you who are on the same postage stamp you're on. Mm-hmm. But when you let your consciousness expand, once you self-identify with being consciousness, potentially infinite in its scale, instead of being the labels, now your consciousness starts to travel and connect with levels of reality, levels of perception, levels of information that is way beyond the postage stamp. Now, instead of being in the world and of it, and you're trying to make sense of a world while getting information to make sense of the world from that world, and only that world. I mean, what's that going to do except keep you on the, like a mouse on the running around the wheel.
Hamster wheel.
Instead, you're starting to get inspiration and insight. And basically, what you're doing is you start to look at the world from outside the world. When I say the world, I mean this reality. And you start to see it in a completely different way. Suddenly, instead of everything being random dots, now you can see the connections. Now, instead of pixels, you see pictures. And you see how everything's connected. And it's a completely different way of seeing the world. But of course, when you start to do that, and you start to articulate what you're observing, that which is still on the postage stamp in the world and of it thinks you're absolutely bonkers. Yeah. Crazy, mad, because they literally, and this, go back to the computer analogy, they literally can't compute what you're computing. Not that you're better than them, but you are seeing the world in a much more expanded way. And as I've gone around the world, particularly since 2016 on a world speaking tour, where they let me in these days, the number of people from all the walks of life and backgrounds who are going through this process of reassessing the world, reassessing self, is phenomenal compared with what it's been before. And because of the suppression of information and this focus on this postage stamp, I mean, watch any BBC, ITV news bulletin, you'll see the postage stamp reported, that's all, nothing beyond it. People don't realize the scale of the wake-up that's happening. And they're trying to shut that down with the censorship. But, you know, once it starts, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's very difficult to put it back. And they know that because in so many ways, what's happening now with the censorship, extremely arrogant, we'll do what we like. But behind the arrogance is actually panic.
Yeah.
Because they know the consequences for their control system of people waking up to reality beyond the control system. And it is happening, but not on the scale we would like, but it's happening greater than I've ever seen.